out to the car to make sure they were leaving some sort of
land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
When I was assigned, excuse me, when I was assigned the job of getting a speaker for the day, I thought to myself, one of the things that we want to talk about is children, and the education feature of what's going on in the world of education relating to children might be a good subject. I thought about the people that might be speaking for this, and one of the people that came to mind was one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. There's a young man named Bob Tuskin. He's a graduate of the University of Florida in philosophy. He is the creator and sponsor of a national conference that happens every year or every other year in Philadelphia called Free Your Mind. He is the sponsor of a weekly, a daily program, Monday through Friday night at 9 o'clock, the Bob Tuskin Show, so you can hear him on the radio every night. He's got an app on my iPhone, for example. It's the Bob Tuskin app. So he's well-known nationally. He has friends internationally, and he is he's going to surprise me because I have no idea what he's going to talk about. It's something about education, and here he is, Bob Tuskin.
Thank you, Hart. So as Hart mentioned, I got a degree at the University of Florida in philosophy, which really at the end of the day means absolutely nothing. In fact, when I tell people that, the most common reaction I get is laughter. You would think I got a degree in comedy, but I got a degree in philosophy, which does not necessarily translate into the minds of most people today, because the first question is, well, what are you going to do with that? I actually had a college advisor ask me, he took me into his office and he said, Bob, I know you're getting a degree in philosophy. What the hell are you going to do? Are you going to law school? What are you going to do? And I said, you know what? How I make money is my business and none of yours. I'm interested in learning. And if you break down the meaning of the word philosophy, it literally means the love of wisdom. And that love of wisdom is what I'm going to be talking about today for my talk, which is innate in all of us. We have this natural love of wisdom from children, as a child rather, and it is in many different points in our lives diminished by the conditions of our world today and our system. At every corner we tell our children that they need to be forced to learn rather than tap into the natural curiosity of learning. But in order for them to really embark on that journey of natural learning, it's a term I'm going to coin right now, natural learning, they need to have the prerequisite, the foundation of learning. And that foundation is found with what's called a classical education. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in order to move forward. So 200 years ago in many of the elite schools, a classic liberal arts education was commonplace. And that classic education consisted of two parts, the trivium education and the quadrivium. The trivium consists of, I can get this clicker to go here.
AV specialist.
It worked a minute ago.
Yeah, it did. Oh, I know why. Because the screen is taken off. Let's try it now. Okay. The trivium first starts with grammar. And don't let your eyes gloss over here. This is going to be a boring talk on punctuation or anything like that. But grammar most simply refers to the building blocks of learning. In order to process our information that we're given, we have to start with identified terms. It's the building blocks, if you will, of this house of learning that I'm about to build for you. And it starts with the understanding of words themselves and the way in which the context of these words are used. Without that, the rest of everything else in this learning process is unfounded and is going to be convoluted. So you have to start with a solid understanding of what's at hand and what we're discussing, and that's where grammar comes in. Now the trivium has been presented, these three parts, in many different orders. But I want to really highlight the fact that we have to do it in this order for it to be properly used. After you get established the terms, you then put things through logic, which is the processor of this computer, of this house. It's finding contradictions, and that's what I studied and focused on mostly, was logic and identifying logical fallacies, which is so important today because everywhere you look, you find logical fallacies. We have the media telling us because a group of people have this popular belief that therefore it is true. And truth does not have any bearing on what the popular connotation of something is. The truth, even if one person thinks that water is made of hydrogen and two hydrogen? H2O? Yeah. See, I don't even know what the truth is. Anyways, the point being that the truth that water is the truth no matter how many people, if there's millions of people that tell you otherwise, the truth is still the truth, regardless of the majority or minority. And that's why democracy and this connotation of democracy is very scary to me. The idea that groupthink and mob rule is appropriate is very much a counterintuitive stance that defies logic. And I could sit here and break down every single logical fallacy. One that I see, just to highlight a few very often, is this appeal to authority. To say that somebody is a doctor, that therefore they can tell you what you need to do when it comes to cancer, and because they're an oncologist, they know the effective route, or because a study or university or an establishment tells you that something is so, does not necessarily mean that it is the truth. Their authority, again, is separate from the facts in the matter. And that's very important. And if we can teach our children this process of first grammar, then logic, putting it through the rigmarole, as I said, the processor in the computer, then they're going to come out to the next portion of the trivium, which is rhetoric, with an actual understanding and ability to act accordingly. And this rhetoric is a little misleading. Rhetoric, in this case, refers to wisdom, not this traditional connotation these days of rhetoric, but it talks about applying the knowledge that you've then accumulated and processed. So once you've accumulated it and processed it, the next step is action. And that cannot be missed out on, because the action, the wisdom, if you will, is a very important function in our learning process. Being able to take what we've come to find out as truth and then being able to act on that knowledge accordingly or bring up that knowledge accordingly is an extremely important function of the trivium education. So the trivium, logic, the arts of thinking, grammar, the art of inventing and combining symbols, and rhetoric, the art of communicating or acting on that wisdom. The quadrivium, which I won't go into too much great detail, is a four-part system of learning, traditionally again included in the 7 classic arts of education, and it consists of arithmetic, music, which as many of you know is being removed from our schooling today in rapid pace, which is of great detriment to the minds of our children. And it also consists of things like geometry and astronomy, not astrology. I know everybody out there is wondering if there are Pisces or an Aries, if that matters. Well, no. Astronomy, which is very much an important part of philosophy traditionally. This idea of time and space has always fascinated me personally and is very much a part of these 7 liberal arts. So that's the foundation, and that's sort of the prerequisite. Now, at this point, now that we've taught our children how to think, not what to think, but how to think, the critical thinking skills that they can apply to any subject matter, okay? Because that's how well-versed and how diverse this learning process is. It's the difference of starting them off saying, you need to learn this, learn that, and you need to regurgitate this in a fashion that's going to meet the criteria that we set. This is in direct opposition to that, or at least not necessarily opposition, but this is in the opposite of it, if you will. Excuse me. And this gives you the process of being able to critically think no matter what it is that you're trying to retain. So it's the difference of retention versus actually working through the different subject matters naturally. And as I started my talk off, we have the desire to naturally learn. And somebody who found this out was the teacher of the year, somebody that everyone should know about. His name is John Tiller Gatto. He is the author of Dumbing Us Down, the Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling, The Exhausted School, a different kind of teacher, and Solving the Crisis of American Schooling. And his other books include The Underground History of American Education and Weapons of Mass Instruction, A School Teacher's Journey Through the Dark World of Compulsory Schooling. He was going through the track record of your typical educator. He, as I said, won Teacher of the Year in New York City. He quit teaching on the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal in 1991 rather, while still being the New York Teacher of the Year, claiming that he was no longer willing to hurt children. And I believe very firmly that what he found out, being in the belly of the beast, if you will, was exactly the problem with education today. And what he was able to do to advocate for a genuine education process was absolutely remarkable and fit in line with what we've been taken away from. Some might argue that Common Core, the most recent rendition of our education system, is a part of this digression from an actual truthful education. And he has many different compelling points, and I urge everyone to check out his books if you're interested in this topic. One of the quotes, and I'll do a bunch of quotes today to truly highlight the great minds in this way of thinking. One of his quotes is, "I've come slowly to understand what it is really I teach. A curriculum of confusion, class position, arbitrary justice, vulgarity, rudeness, disrespect for privacy, indifference to quality, and utter dependency. I teach how to fit into a world that I don't want to live in." And again, this is the Teacher of the Year. Very different tale than what you might expect. He also said that school is about learning to wait your turn, however long it takes to come, if ever, and how to submit with a show of enthusiasm to the judgment of strangers, even if they are wrong, even if your enthusiasm is phony. And I had this experience in school, and I despised it. As somebody who naturally was curious and desired truth, what my folks and my teachers used to tell me as far as how they came to a conclusion was not enough. They would say, "Because I said so." And that never worked for me. I don't know about you, but that never fit the bill. This appeal, again, going back to logic, a classic appeal to authority. Because you said so means absolutely nothing to me and doesn't satisfy my desire to get to the bottom of it. Why? And I'm getting this from my son now. Why? And I almost a few times I've fallen into the trap myself of wanting to take that easy out. Why is the sky blue? Because it is. No, the sky is blue because of properties in the sky that make it so. And this desire for us to figure out these answers as children is naturally there and is quashed in many respects as we get older. We're told to rely on the dependency of books, which are helpful, and of authority rather than come to these conclusions in a critical way. Daniel Quinn, the author of the popular book Ishmael, he's also come out on this topic, and again, these are well-educated people, authors, writers, and so on and so forth, and he had a great quote saying, "Children don't need learning. They need access to what they want to learn outside the home." So they're born with that desire. And slowly but surely, again, that's chipped away and it's removed from their consciousness with schooling. If the world is saved, it will not be saved by old minds with new programs, but by new minds with no programs at all. That's also Daniel Quinn. And Daniel Quinn goes on to say that you wouldn't know from experience that small children are the most powerful learning engines in the known universe. My son proves this to me on a regular basis. One of the examples that I have is he did something, I can't even remember exactly what it was, but he did something, and I said to myself, how the hell did he know how to do that? I never showed him this. I never explained this to him. He must have picked it up naturally through his own innate curiosity that he was born with. And I want to tap into that. I don't want to diminish that. I don't want people to feel as if that's not what they were born doing, this learning process. And as a result, I advocate on some level as an alternative to our compulsory schooling, which I've sort of surpassed and gone beyond, a method called unschooling. And the person most credited with unschooling is a gentleman by the name of John Holt. Unschooling, right? What is unschooling? Well, unschooling is just that. It's the lack of this rigid, compulsory desire to group children into categories based on age and tell them when and what they need to think and at what arbitrary level they need to think about it at. And John Holt, in this quote here, says that we ask children to do for most of a day what few adults are able to do for even an hour. How many of us attending, say, a lecture that doesn't interest us can keep our minds from wandering? Hardly any. I bet a lot of you right now, you have your minds wandering as I speak. So freaking boring. Well, hopefully it's not. But the point being, you know, they're told they have to sit quiet. We have little boys who are told that they have ADD rather than the fact that they naturally want to exercise more, and they're removing the PE from most of our schools on some level in various degrees. They're told they need to sit down, shut up, and raise their hand and speak when they're spoken to. That's not how we operate as human beings. It's a dehumanization, in my mind, of the natural ability to think and learn. And when I look at schools today, they remind me more of prisons than they do places of education. And I quite literally mean that. If you look at the makeup of schools today, we have barbed wire fences and we have police officers in constant contact with our schools. We have this process of schooling that is authorized by the state. You know, if you don't go to school, then you're truant, and so on and so forth. John Holt was really a great mind in this unschooling philosophy. He goes on to say that any child who can spend an hour or two a day, or more if he wants, with adults that he likes, who are interested in the world and like to talk about it, will on most days learn far more from their talk than he would learn in a week of school. That resonates with me. I don't know about you, but if I'm interested in something, if I'm genuinely interested in something, I'm going to have far more success in retaining that knowledge and using that knowledge in my day-to-day life. Something that's forced down my throat, I might memorize it, but I'm not going to retain it. I'm not going to be able to apply it. And that's what education wants our children to do. Force it down the throat, cram it down, memorize, test, test. To what end, I ask? Ask questions to find out something about the world itself, not to find out whether or not someone knows it. Also a John Holt quote. And the last quote from John Holt, who's accredited as being the father of unschooling. What makes people smart, curious, alert, observant, competent, confident, resourceful, persistent, in the broadest and best sense, intelligent, is not having access to more and more learning places, resources, and specialists, but being able in their lives to do a wide variety of interesting things that matter, things that challenge their ingenuity, skill, and judgment, and that make an obvious difference in their lives and the lives of people around them. Well, to me, that's what the Kiwanis Club does in many respects. And that, again, is something that is not entirely represented in our traditional schooling today. One of his influencers was George Bernard Shaw. Many of you might be familiar with the philosopher George Bernard Shaw. And George stated that my schooling not only failed to teach me what it professed to be teaching, but prevented me from being educated to an extent which infuriates me when I think of all I might have learned at home by myself. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do value teachers and value the transfer of knowledge. But the way in which it's set up today is of no help to our children. In fact, it only corrodes their, again, innate desire to learn and to figure out this crazy world we live in with so many components. And what we're doing these days is we're making robots rather than free thinkers and human beings that, again, really desire a better world and desire an understanding of this world. When I hear about homeschooling from those out there that don't homeschool or have this, if you will, mainstream connotation of homeschooling or unschooling, the first response I get is typically that of social conditioning, if you will. The idea that if our children don't go to school, that they're going to be antisocial and they're not going to have the same experiences. Well, I don't know about you, but being forced in school with my peers of my age that I didn't necessarily genuinely like was of no service to me being social. In fact, if anything, the bullying culture and this forced nature of the social interactions really was of a detriment to my social nature. In addition to that, I also heard it said once that our children learn from who they spend the majority of their time with. And when, in the case of school, they spend the majority of the time with their peers. Well, I don't want my son spending the majority of the time with his peers who don't have the ethics and morals and knowledge that I have that I want to share with my son. So the question is, do you want your children to get their ethics and morality and knowledge from their peers? Or do you want your children to get that transference of knowledge from us as the adults with the understanding and so on and so forth? And the answer seems pretty darn obvious to me. I've interviewed a number of people on this topic, and I find it to be one of the most compelling issues of our time. You know, there's so many things I could have talked about today, but really the children, and this might sound cliche, it is, but it's true, are our future. And it all starts with planting the seed at that point in time so that when they grow up and flourish in our society today, they have the proper tools, the trivium and quadrivium, and the proper experience to be able to function and make this world a better place. There is, however, a group of people out there, in my eyes, that want to take us away from this. And, well, that group, in this case, I'm going to represent by John D. Rockefeller and David Rockefeller, who were famously quoted in saying, John D. Rockefeller, who, again, created the General Education Board in 1903. You might ask, why is the Rockefeller, this very wealthy family, getting involved with education? Well, his thought was, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. That's what he said. And then his next most famous quote here, and I think this is David, his son, David Rockefeller says, "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order." Now, what does he mean by the New World Order? What does he mean by a major crisis? Rob Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, was quoted in saying that he never lets a good crisis go to waste. And if you look at the Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, You know how these tragedies are exploited for agendas that are necessarily in our best interest. And I can digress into many different avenues there, but I will stick to education and stress the importance of breaking free from our current paradigm and truly promoting a free mind, one that, again, is, for the 15th time, innately there in us all. Thank you.
Shane, stop putting Stoner approved seals on the fried chicken.
You may need to go back and explain that to everybody.
If you smoke marijuana, you're a stoner and you get hungry and you want to eat. So he's saying the fried chicken is stoner approved. You can eat the fried chicken if you've been on marijuana.
You gotta explain the joke, it ain't any good.
Y'all are old.